Mahatma Gandhi, regarded as a saint by many, on the subject of injustice, and specifically on the subject of people humiliating other people, said this: "It has always been a mystery to me how men can feel themselves honored by the humiliation of their fellow beings." This is the third program in a series I'm doing on Mahatma Gandhi. The title of the series is Gandhi, Revolutionary, Saint, Philosopher, with the emphasis on philosopher. Today's program will focus on Gandhi's philosophy concerning the true religion, his philosophy concerning human relations, with emphasis on his ideas concerning friendship and also man's inhumanity to man. I'll also focus on Gandhi's ideas concerning education and what he believed should be the goals of education. It is interesting that Gandhi, who had a law degree, had 4 sons and did not encourage any of them to go to college, and indeed none of them did go to college. And Gandhi comments in his autobiography that when his boys grew into adulthood, they complained to him about his lack of encouragement. And in his autobiography, he talks about why he did not encourage them to go to college, and again, what he believes good education consists of. And finally, today, I'll be talking about Gandhi's philosophy concerning achieving greater tranquility in life. My primary source is Gandhi's autobiography, which has the very interesting title of The Story of My Experiments with Truth. Again, Gandhi's autobiography is entitled The Story of My Experiments with Truth. First, a brief review of the previous segments I've done on Gandhi. For approximately 20 years, Gandhi led the Indian independence movement against Great Britain. You will recall that Great Britain ruled India for about 200 years, until 1947. Gandhi's method was one of nonviolence. Indeed, historian Will Durant has described the Indian independence movement in the following way. He says, "India gave to the world the unprecedented phenomenon of a revolution led by a saint and waged without a gun." The Indians did get their independence in 1947, and the following year Gandhi was assassinated. At age 78, Gandhi was killed by a fellow Hindu. And one of the reasons, indeed the main reason, his killer gave for giving him was that his assassin believed that Gandhi, who himself was a Hindu, was showing too much toleration of Muslims and was making too many concessions to Muslims in India. So Gandhi, in a certain sense, was assassinated because of his promotion of religious tolerance in India. Gandhi is as much known for his philosophy of life as for his revolutionary activity. At age 37, Gandhi decided to adopt celibacy as his lifestyle. And in his 40s, he adopted a lifestyle of voluntary poverty. And also, it was around that time that Gandhi began to study comparative religion. Gandhi spent a total of 6 years in jail for violating different British laws in his attempt to secure independence for India. And he says that among the books he read in prison were the great holy books of the various religions. And among the conclusions Gandhi came to after studying the holy books of the great religions and after studying comparative religion were the following. He said that all great religions contain important truths, but all are flawed. He also said that God's not concerned with labels. Gandhi said that God is not interested in whether we label ourselves Christians or Muslims or Jews or Hindus, but rather God is interested in how we behave. Gandhi, on the subject of holy books, said this. He said all holy books are the products of human hands and human minds. Again, all holy books, scriptures, are the products of human minds and human hands. And also, Gandhi commented that all holy books are open to interpretation. Let's talk about Gandhi's attitude towards the true religion. Gandhi goes far beyond attending. Gandhi believes that true religion goes far beyond attending a religious service or reading a holy book. For Gandhi, true religion consists of action, of service to one's fellow man. For example, if one is truly religious, according to Gandhi, one might be caring for the old and the sick, or promoting justice in the world. Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., and so many other people have gone to jail in the cause of promoting justice in the world. Also, Gandhi believed that doing one's job conscientiously was evidence of one's religious spirit. Indeed, Gandhi believed that how one does one's job is an expression of the depth of one's religion. And of course, Gandhi believed that kindness was an expression of one's religion. It reminds me of something Anne Frank said in her diary. Perhaps you're familiar with this quote. Anne Frank said that we can always give something to others, even if it's only kindness. And Gandhi believed that the degree of one's kindness is an expression of the depth of one's religion. Again, the degree of one's kindness is an expression of the depth of one's religion. Gandhi believed that if we are to be truly religious, we must become less self-centered. He believed that our self-centeredness kills the spirit of others as well as our own spirit. Gandhi's remarks remind me of something the Dalai Lama has said. The Dalai Lama has said that being kind to others and trying to promote justice in the world is a wise selfishness. The idea that when we help others, we help ourselves. Gandhi, on the subject of human relations, talks about friendship, among other things. And in his autobiography, Gandhi says that true friendship is rare in this world. Let me give you his own words. True friendship is an identity of souls, rarely to be found in this world. Only between like natures can friendship be altogether worthy and enduring. He's not talking about what ordinarily passes for friendship in this world. In fact, Gandhi's comments about friendship are somewhat reminiscent of Aristotle's attitude towards friendship. Aristotle enumerated 3 kinds of friendship, going from the lowest to the highest kind of friendship. And Aristotle said that in the highest kind of friendship, what people give to each other is the following: encouragement, stimulation, and example in living well and living virtuously. Example in living well and living virtuously. In other words, Aristotle believed in the best friendships, people provide soul food for each other. Gandhi also believed that, and that's why he believed that this kind of friendship, the highest kind of friendship, is so rare in the world. Other famous thinkers have agreed with Gandhi. Henry Adams, a professor at Harvard, in his very famous autobiography entitled The Education of Henry Adams, says this about friendship, and I'm quoting Professor Adams. 1 friend in a lifetime is much, 2 are many, and 3 are hardly possible. And Ralph Waldo Emerson, in his very famous essay on friendship, said this: we walk alone in the world. Friends such as we desire are but dreams and fables. Gandhi believed that one of the dangers of relating to other human beings is that we take in vice far more readily than virtue. I suspect many parents believe this, and that's why they're so concerned about whom their children hang out with. Gandhi, in his autobiography, says this: friends react on one another. I am of the opinion that all exclusive intimacies are to be avoided, for man takes in vice far more readily than virtue. Again, Gandhi reminds me of the Buddhists who talk about right association. The Buddhists believe that if we are to move to higher levels of spirituality, it's very important that we hang out with the right people, so to speak, that we associate with the right people, people who are going to help us to become more virtuous, rather than impair our efforts to become more virtuous. Gandhi said we should all be friends with God. How so? How can we be friends with God? Again, Gandhi's own words. He who would be friends with God must remain alone or make the world his friend. Gandhi believed that for very spiritual people, the highest form of love is not romantic love, but love of mankind. And of course, there are many examples of people who have shared Gandhi's idea. Among the many are Buddhist monks, Christian monks, Mother Teresa, Dr. Albert Schweitzer, people who try to make the world their friend. For those of you who have tuned in late, the name of the program you're watching is Life, Love, and Philosophy, and today's topic is Mahatma Gandhi. The title of today's segment is Mahatma Gandhi, Revolutionary, Saint, Philosopher. Gandhi, in his own life, was the victim of much humiliation, and he also witnessed many other people being humiliated. In his autobiography, he talks about the humiliation he experienced during his 21 years as a lawyer in South Africa. He mentions that Indians were treated as colored people in South Africa and were accordingly discriminated against. He mentions two particular instances. He talks about one instance when he was on a train in South Africa in a first-class compartment, and he had the appropriate ticket. He had a ticket for a first-class compartment. But a policeman came into the compartment and insisted that Gandhi move to the colored section of the train. Gandhi refused, and when the train made its next stop, the policeman threw Gandhi off the train and also threw his suitcases onto the station platform. And Gandhi said it was one of the creative experiences of his life, suffering this kind of humiliation. He also mentions in his autobiography that another time in South Africa, he was pushed and kicked by a white policeman because he, Gandhi, was using a sidewalk after curfew. At this time, there was a curfew for colored people in South Africa. And as I indicated, Indians, as well as black people, were considered to be colored people in South Africa. Gandhi says that he was afraid of being insulted in his early days in South Africa. Indeed, he mentions that he was once pelted with stones and rotten eggs. A crowd of whites ganged up on him. Apparently, he says, they thought he was a leader of the Indian community in South Africa, which he was, and he describes the scene. Gandhi says, "They pelted me with stones, brickbats, and rotten eggs. Someone snatched away my turban. Someone snatched away my turban, whilst others began to batter and kick me." Gandhi returned to India in 1915 at the age of 46. Again, he had spent 21 years practicing as a lawyer in South Africa. And when Gandhi returned to India, again, he witnessed all of the discrimination that was present in India. For example, the fact that the Brits were ruling India against their will. Gandhi considered this to be an insult to the Indians, the fact that they were not allowed to rule themselves. And indeed, Gandhi talks about the hypocrisy of the British, wanting democracy for themselves, but not allowing the Indians to have democracy for themselves. And another instance of injustice, of humiliation, Gandhi talks about in his autobiography, is how some Indians discriminated against other Indians. He talks about the untouchables in India, a group of Indians segregated from other Indians. Usually they had to live in the worst areas of the villages and were shunned by other people, were prevented from marrying people who were not considered untouchables, and generally had to do the dirtiest jobs. Gandhi, on the subject of people humiliating each other, says this, and I'm quoting him. "It has always been a mystery to me how men can feel themselves honored by the humiliation of their fellow beings." Again, it has always been a mystery to me how men can feel themselves honored by the humiliation of their fellow beings. Is it a mystery to you? Well, it hasn't been a mystery to some of the famous thinkers in history. Let me give you their version of why they believe people humiliate other people. Alfred Adler, the very famous psychiatrist, said this: "The goal of superiority, of power, of the conquest of others, is the goal which directs the activity of most human beings." And according to Adler, why do most people want to feel superior to other people? Why do most people want power over other people? Adler says it all goes back to the inferiority complex. Adler believed that feelings of inferiority are at the root of human psychology, and people try to compensate for these feelings of inferiority by questing for superiority over other people, and in some cases that can mean humiliating other people. T.S. Eliot, another great thinker, in his play called The Cocktail Party, provides further illumination about why people often treat other people unjustly. Eliot has a character say this. Indeed, the character is a psychiatrist. What he says: "Half the harm in this world is done by people who want to feel important. They are absorbed in the endless struggle to think well of themselves." And what was Freud's take on injustice in the world? Well, Freud believed that people by nature are not gentle. Freud believed that people are innately aggressive. He believed aggressiveness is an instinct, and it's something we human beings have to work at countering. Well, what did Gandhi believe had to be done to try to end, or at least reduce, injustice and humiliation in the world? Well, Gandhi believed that the key to making the world a better place was education. And what did Gandhi believe to be the primary goal of education? Gandhi said the primary goal of education is character building. And what does character building involve? Well, it involves many things, among which are the following. Character building involves being introspective. Gandhi said we should turn the searchlight inward and examine our motives, examine our consciences, and purify our hearts to the extent that it's possible to do. In other words, Gandhi said if the world is ever to be a better place, people must have more self-knowledge. For example, does my envy cause me to hurt other people? Does my questing for status and money cause me to treat other people unfairly? These are questions Gandhi believed all of us should ask ourselves. Gandhi said this on the subject of money and prestige. That's a rather famous quote. "How heavy is the toll of sins and wrongs that wealth, money, and prestige exact from man." Let me say that again. Again, Gandhi, in his autobiography, says this: "How heavy is the toll of sins and wrongs that that wealth, power, and prestige exact from man." Gandhi also believed that character building involves learning to control the senses, that education should work at helping people to cultivate self-discipline, and also an ability to delay gratification. What have other thinkers said about Gandhi's idea concerning the fact, or what he believed to be the fact, that the primary goal of education should be character building and not knowledge? Well, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who lived a century before Gandhi, in a very famous essay on education, sounded a similar note to Gandhi's. Emerson said, "Character is superior to intellect. And Goethe, the very famous German intellectual, said this: intellect without character is far worse than character without intellect. Again, Goethe, intellect without character is far worse than character without intellect. Who is better educated, I ask you? The prosperous, dishonest businessman with prestigious degrees from different universities, or the honest, hard-working, blue-collar worker who has never gone to college? For Gandhi, that would be a no-brainer. Gandhi would submit to you that the blue-collar worker is better educated because he has an educated heart. Gandhi said this: each of us should turn the searchlight inward, purify his or her heart as much as possible. I mentioned early on that Gandhi had a law degree and had 4 sons, yet did not encourage any of them to go to college. And as a consequence, none did, but all later in life complained to their father. They believed that in a certain sense he had let them down. And Gandhi, in his autobiography, explains himself and in a certain sense tries to defend himself. And here's what he says: it has been my regret that I failed to ensure my children enough literary training, but I hold that I sacrificed their literary training to what I genuinely believed to be service to the community. But I have not been negligent in doing whatever was needful for building up their character. Again, that last sentence is pretty much his defense. He says, but I have not been negligent in doing whatever was needful for building up their character. One aspect of Gandhi's philosophy concerns his recommendations for living a more tranquil life. And among Gandhi's suggestions, besides getting a good education, one that helps oneself to purify one's heart, Gandhi believed that we should all make silence an important part of our lives. Gandhi used Monday as his day of silence. If you spoke to Gandhi on a Monday, he would not verbally respond. He would respond in writing. Why so? Why did Gandhi make it a practice of making Monday his day of silence? Well, Gandhi believed that silence has a spiritually uplifting effect on us. Gandhi believed that, among other things, silence helps us eat up anger. Again, silence helps us eat up anger and also helps us to re-energize ourselves. Gandhi was not a person who was interested in small talk. Let me give you his own words. Experience has taught me that silence is part of the spiritual discipline of a seeker of truth. Even today, I do not think I would even be inclined to keep a meeting of friends engaged in idle talk. All this talk can hardly be said to be of any benefit to the world. Gandhi had the idea that we all talk too much, and the world would be a better place spiritually, as well as in other ways, if we all did a lot less talking. Gandhi, therefore, advocated a day of silence for everyone interested in becoming more spiritual. And it is interesting that all the major religions emphasize the importance of silence in becoming a more spiritual person. We know that Jesus and Buddha sought comfort in silence. And I know that in my own life, I find that silence helps me to do my best thinking and helps me to experience my most tranquil moments. As you probably know, Holland is my home away from home. And when I am in Holland for part of the year, I have a certain daily ritual I follow. While eating breakfast in the morning, I read segments of one of 3 different holy books. I read either segments from the Dhammapada, a Buddhist holy book, or the Bhagavad Gita, a Hindu holy book, or the New Testament, a Christian holy book. And of course I do this in silence, And following a silent breakfast, reading these books, I then take a solitary walk in a lovely park. And I find that the silence and the tranquility of the morning make me a more loving person. And after my walk, I'm better disposed to talk to people, although I don't have to. Gandhi also believed there was a connection between tranquility and diet, between tranquility and good nutrition. Gandhi devoted much of his life to studying nutrition. Indeed, two of Gandhi's favorite topics in terms of studying them were comparative religion and nutrition. Gandhi cites a Hindu proverb which says, "As a man eats, so he becomes." As a man eats, so shall he become. Gandhi believed that if we eat the right foods, that will enhance our energy level and also help us to be more relaxed. That Gandhi believed if we wish to be more spiritual, we must pay attention to our diet. And one of the things we must do is to restrict our diet to quality foods and also to restrict the quantity of foods that we consume. Gandhi, incidentally, was a vegetarian, and he argued that human beings were designed to be vegetarian. Summing up now some of the points I've made in this program. Gandhi had a spiritual vision of life as a pilgrimage. Indeed, the name of his autobiography is The Story of My Experiments with Truth. Gandhi encourages us to experiment with new attitudes and new behaviors. Gandhi believes that a successful life is not one that involves accumulating things and status, but rather success in life means working to achieve an ever purer heart. Gandhi's formula for the good life is this: virtue plus service to others. He believed that life will still be difficult if we are virtuous and benevolent, but that life will have a sweeter flavor. And I think this particular quote sums up Gandhi's philosophy as well as any quote I know of. Gandhi said, "After all, what matters is that our capacity for loving ever expands." Finally, Henry David Thoreau reminds us that we are all artists. In Walden, Thoreau wrote, "The highest of arts is to affect the quality of the day."